Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 535, the 20th of January 2019. Richard Saunders coming to you along a country roadside just outside of Bend, Oregon. I'm spending a few days chilling out, and I mean chilling out, with my good friend Brian Dunning from Skeptoid. Later on in the show, we catch up with Brian's project, or news about Brian's project, Science Friction, to see how that's going along. This is where he, or the documentary, will interview scientists who have been misrepresented in the media. Whew. So a couple of degrees above zero. I'm just out walking along the roadside here for exercise, really, and tramping on snow, which is great fun for somebody from Sydney, Australia. Also in this week's podcast, a report of the live show of Oh No, Ross and Carrie, which was a couple of days ago in Portland, Oregon. And we chat to Ross Blocher after the show. What a fantastic show it was, and great to see a live recording of a podcast in front of a very enthusiastic audience. Hello, dog. You look a bit cold. Hey. It's all right. It's behind a fence. I don't think I'll get any closer. I'm actually passing a paddock with now horses grazing just by the roadside here. And I'm not used to seeing chains on car tires. People who live in colder climates will think I've lost the plot, but to me it's very interesting. And added to this week's show, I go to the National Center for Science Education in Oakland, California, and speak to Brad Hoge about the efforts the center is making to help battle misinformation about climate change, and what resources and help they can offer teachers around the world, really, when it comes to helping them to convey the science of climate change. Oh wow, there's another horse grazing. I don't know why. I've got a new respect for horses and cows and things. Seem to be, they don't care about this cold weather. It's just beautiful here in Bend, Oregon. And as somebody who, and Skeptic Zone listeners may well know, remember, I don't cope well in the heat and humidity. To be here in a cold, crisp environment, dressed up, gloves and breathing the cold air, well, to me it's pretty good. I don't know where I'm walking to. I'm just exploring. And why not cross over to the other side of the road? There's still lots of snow everywhere. Hello, what's this? A big, long patch of ice. Wow, better be careful. Well, while I keep walking along this snowy road in search of something to eat or drink, maybe a hot cup of coffee, I hope you enjoy this week's Skeptic Zone. Since 2011, the Oh No, Ross and Carrie podcast with Ross Blocher and Carrie Poppy has been investigating science, spirituality, medicine, fringe beliefs. The motto of the podcast is, we show up so you don't have to. I had the pleasure of interviewing Ross and Carrie way back, I think in about 2011, when their podcast was relatively new. And now they're taking their show on the road. And I had had the great pleasure of attending their performance in Portland, Oregon, where I caught up with Ross after the show.
So this is Drew being very unhappy.
So mad. So they're between us here. I'm theoretically on the right, though obviously I'm taking this picture. And I put them between us, and he made this face.
Okay. All right. I feel like something's just brewing up in the audience here.
Okay. Yeah, we'll just see what happens.
And remember,
authentic, spirit, magical, powerful.
And some people.
So we're stepping out now. I'm with Ross from Oh No, Ross and Carrie. Great show, Ross.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Yeah, it was a full house.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people were there, but it was a nice theatre with a full house up and down, and you and Carrie came out and singing and did a really great show.
This was Carrie's idea that we come out singing not Part of Your World, that's Little Mermaid. This was Aladdin, A Whole New World. With the flat earth behind us, which won't make any sense to people listening to it later, but hopefully at least it made sense to everyone in the audience.
Well, it's freezing cold out here on the street. We better put our bags away, and we'll have a chat in a minute. Ross, great to see you again. We haven't seen each other for a few years.
Likewise. Always wonderful to see you, Richard.
And it's interesting, only 6 or 7 weeks ago, Maynard was interviewing Carrie because she came to the convention in Australia. I think we're going to have to try and wangle it so you come to visit too.
Yes, please. Oh, yeah. I'm really excited to come down to Australia, so please give me an excuse.
We'll look into that. But
and a plane ticket.
And a plane ticket, that always helps. But as I was saying, it was a full venue tonight, and weren't the crowd loving it? They were really into the show tonight.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it's, podcasting, you know this. You talk into a microphone and you put it out somewhere as a file, and, eventually you hear that people have listened to it. But it's so great to meet people in person and know that our message, the silly thing about this was haunted dolls in this particular case, but just the silly message of having fun with these kind of zany beliefs and exploring them from different angles resonates with people.
Well, it does, and I could tell that by the reaction from the audience, especially when they ask personal questions about children and pets,
Yeah, and that's always the amazing thing is people will stop by afterwards to tell us that, maybe hearing us go through one of these adventures helped them as they were dealing with a sick loved one or going through a really hard time in their lives. And you don't anticipate something like that when you're talking about these issues, haunted houses and Scientology and firewalking and all that. But I guess sometimes that can just help people sort of stay grounded and maybe get outside of whatever troubles they're facing.
Now, how long has the podcast Oh No, Ross and Carrie been with Maximum Fun? It's a network of podcasters?
Yeah, since 2014, beginning of 2014, so 5 years now.
Wow.
And yeah, it's a great family with a lot of fantastic comedy and culture shows. So you've got the McElroy brothers with a bunch of their shows. Sawbones is one of my favorites. If anybody's looking for a good recommendation. Reading Glasses is another favorite. There's My Brother and Me, Judge John Hodgman, all kinds of great content on that network. So we're proud to be part of it.
Well, again, great to see you again, Ross. Thanks for doing the live show. It was nice to catch up with Carrie Poppy as well. And folks, there's the message. Of course, we run regular promos for Oh No, Ross and Carrie, and we look forward to your next adventure.
Thank you so much, Richard. And I'm sure our next adventure will be somewhere here in the Portland area, I hope.
This is NASA. I see a flat Earth, but we should lie to everybody about it and say it's round. 10-4.
Maximum Fun brings you the latest podcasts and expose on the flat Earth.
to take advantage of humankind and make them believe a lie so that they will trust us with the government.
It's all an elaborate lie. And when you get on a plane, they purposefully fly you farther than you need to go.
It's disgusting. It needs to be stopped. And if you listen to Oh No, Ross and Carrie, we will tell you the truth behind the lies.
Just kidding.
No, we won't do that. We will just tell you the truth behind the truth, because what we do is we look at extraordinary claims.
That's right. We've gone undercover with alternative medical treatments, fringe religious groups, fringe science claims, the spiritual, paranormal. We're there to check it out and let you know what happens.
Is the Queen Mary haunted? I don't know. Find out.
We show up, we make friends, we learn what happens when you ask questions, and we tell you all about it.
And we get all that funky stuff done to us.
It's Oh No, Ross and Carrie
at MaximumFun.org.
Brad Hoge is the Director of Teacher Support at the National Center for Science Education. Brad joined the National Center for Science Education in 2017 to help steward the NCSE Teach into its next phase. He has been a classroom teacher, a children's museum curator, a research scientist, and a science educator, including working as associate professor at the University of Houston, downtown. He holds a Ph.D. in Ecology and Evolutionary Biology from Rice University and a Master's of Education in Curriculum and Instruction from Texas A&M. I decided to take the local transport options to meet with Brad Hoge. To the sounds of traffic roaring down a California highway, I'm at the Orinda BART station. BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit. It's the local train system here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And I'm on my way to the National Center for Science Education in Oakland. And I'm looking forward to this. I've been visiting the National Center now for, over 10 years. It's hard to remember. Certainly if you search the archives of the Skeptic Zone, you'll see many times I've interviewed Dr. Eugenie Scott or Anne Reed, who is the current director. I'm on my way there now, once again, but this time the angle's going to be on climate change. Long steps up from the BART station at 19th Street here in Oakland. And this neighborhood has certainly changed over the years. Lots of construction going on. Very colourful here. A lot of the buildings have very large murals. As I make my way around the corner, around some streets, and head for the National Center for Science Education. And yes, I've made it to the National Center for Science Education once again. And I'm delighted to be back here. And of course, Skeptic Zone fans will know that we've been here many times over the years to talk to all sorts of people, including Eugenie Scott and Anne Reed. Today I'm talking to Brad Hoge. Hello, Brad.
Hello, how are you?
I'm really well. I'm really happy to be here. I love to visit the center here in Oakland, and we look out the windows. Massive building going on in Oakland, I've noticed. But I'm here today. Normally I'm here to talk about creationism, which is the old chestnut, of course, and the work the Centre does to battle creationism and promote good science, and that's still ongoing, of course. But the more pressing issue now, and something the Centre has taken on in the last 4 or 5, 6 years or so, is climate change.
That's right.
And it's far more pressing in my mind, certainly in Australia, than creationism, although I don't want to put that into the background too much because it's still an important issue.
Right.
Probably more important here in the United States. So I'm very interested, and I'm sure that our listeners are interested to know exactly what the National Center for Science Education is doing. What do you have in place, and how do you help, especially teachers, in this issue?
All right, well, we've recently established a program called our Teacher Ambassador Program, which is how we're addressing the issue directly. And we're part of a larger network here that's called CLEAN, and there are people all across the country who are working on climate change issues from an education side of things. So we're not looking to try to do everything ourselves. We have a particular niche where we think we're really effective at communicating controversial issues without controversy and helping teachers know how to do that. So the Teacher Ambassador Program is sort of a three-phase program. First, we recruit really strong teachers who are in areas where it's difficult teaching climate change, but they've figured out how to do it, and they're really good at it. We have a wonderful group of 8 teacher ambassadors that we recruited for climate change. We met with them at George Mason University and working with John Cook there to develop a series of 5 lessons. So it's a 5-lesson unit that focuses on misconceptions. This was kind of in response to that Heartland mailing with that challenge teachers with misinformation. It was a very deliberate attempt to get teachers to teach the wrong things and to think that climate change is not a topic that is founded in science and so forth. So we identified 5 specific misconceptions in that mailing, and each of the 5 lessons addresses one of them. The first one is based on consensus. The fact is that 97% of climate scientists support human impacts causing climate change. So we have a lesson where the students actually work with the data themselves, come to that conclusion independently, and then share their outcomes and realize that no matter which line of evidence they studied, it led to that conclusion, that the only explanation is that human impacts are causing climate change. From there, they look at models, they look at the paleo record, and then they look at the last 2 lessons are place-based. So the teachers find issues where they are that are where climate change is the underlying cause. So whether it's wildfires or drought or decreased snowfall in some areas, they design their lesson around that and get the students involved with data about their local issues. And then the final one, looking at solutions. Most of the time, a lot of times it's more effective to start with solutions to get people involved in a conversation. But we found that with this lesson, if we started with inoculating students with data, by the time we get to solutions, they're really on board to look at it a lot more as something they can be involved in. And so that place-based education works really well. The ultimate goal, though, that those lessons were field tested by the 8 ambassador teachers or teacher ambassadors in their own classrooms, and John has assessed the effectiveness of that, and it worked really well. So we're currently working with them to set up workshops in their areas where they are to try to reach teachers that wouldn't normally come to a workshop with the words climate change in it, or anything that they might, because what we've learned from our own surveys is that teachers are avoiding teaching climate change primarily because it's controversial, and somewhat because they also share those misconceptions. So we're trying to get to those teachers, the teachers that might be a little tentative about wanting to teach climate change. And if we can get our teacher ambassadors to then reach them and give them these lessons and teach them how to do these lessons, then we're going to be able to saturate into that portion of the teaching population that is not teaching climate change effectively. We've already done a series of webinars with these lessons with a partner organization called the Alliance for Climate Education, or ACE, and those went extremely well as well. So those are available on our website along with the lessons themselves.
It's interesting when you're talking about that some teachers are hesitant. It does now remind me of some of the problems with creationism.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of parallels. They're interesting, particularly with our misconception-based focus, because we also have a similar group of teacher ambassadors for evolution, and similarly based on 5 misconceptions and so forth. Misconceptions around creationism are mostly larger conceptual misconceptions, as well as, of course, the conflicts that many people see between evolution and religion, which is why we work with Amanda Glaze on that one, and she's really effective at being able to communicate how there doesn't need to be a conflict there, and you can learn about evolution and still have faith. That doesn't. But that's an aside. I think to get to this point, the similarities being that climate change misconceptions are a little bit more logical fallacy, because they're based on misconceptions that people have naturally due to their inability to grapple with probabilities and changing frequencies and personal biases, but more fundamentally ideologically resistant to the idea of climate change on a political level or an ideological level, because it doesn't align with what their beliefs are in that sense. So there's kind of an underlying similarity in terms of the misconceptions being bolstered by an ideological or religious resistance to just allowing that information to be true.
Now, one of the problems we have in Australia, and I think it's reflected here or vice versa, is the conservative media, especially what we call the shock jocks and the conservative talkback call-in announcers, who are, it's almost a religion with them to rail against this thing of climate change. I imagine you've come across the same sort of thing here.
Yes, definitely. I think when I try and tend to use the word ideology rather than political, but it's kind of the same thing that I'm referring to. And it's, there is a group of, or a mindset rather, of this fight against a globalization of our economy, and the idea that somehow climate change is part of that agenda, that because it's a global issue, that our intent by teaching climate change is to actually try to break down American democracy and turn it into a globalized, and that's really come to what they feel sometimes. Yeah. And even if it's not as upfront in their minds, I think that's sort of the underlying anxieties that drive that ideology, is that climate change is a conspiracy of sorts to try to achieve this liberal agenda of expanding government, because the response to climate change would be mostly a governmental issue, and globalizing our economy, and both of those things are ideologically anathema to them. So that's the underlying aspect of that, and I think that's why a lot of the rhetoric on that, again, is very illogical if you break it down. A lot logical fallacy used to try to attack climate science. A lot of cherry picking of data. A lot of false experts trying to claim that scientists outside of when you look at that 97% consensus number, that's of climate scientists. Those are the scientists who are studying climate directly. If you ask a petroleum geologist or a chemist or a physicist, they're not going to have the expertise to really be able to judge it. So obviously they're able to go into some of the fine scientists who are, quote, scientists who would deny climate change or deny human impact, but they're not the climate scientists who are studying climate.
This is a great point, because if I glance towards my notes, it's exactly the notes I've written here for this interview. Cherry picking I've put here, and experts. Right. And this is very important. We'll get back to these shock jocks and whatever, the conservative media, because they will have on their show an expert, a scientist,
right?
And that to them is game, set, and match.
Right.
They've found somebody who agrees with their side of the story. Right. They interview them, and they say, after the interview, they say to their audience, "Well, there you are.
There you are.
This person is an expert in whatever. They're a scientist, and they say it's all baloney." And I guess that happens here. It would happen here more.
Yeah, and there's two ways that it happens. I think there's one very, again, deliberate way, and this goes back to the tobacco wars and as the climate wars as well, and Naomi Oreskes has documented that quite well in her book, The Merchants of Doubt. And so that's an attempt to actually recruit scientists who are willing to say what the to attack science and to try to make it sound like, well, they're scientists, and so they're saying that this isn't good science. It's bad science. And so that's a deliberate attempt. There's also, however, there are scientists who are outside of their field who feel like they have some capacity for analyzing data sort of from the periphery and coming up with conclusions and having the same sort of ideological anxieties, and it drives them to bad conclusions. I mean, that's always been true in science. It's true, and that's why science as a process works by peer review and constant repetition and so forth. So over decades of research on climate change, the climate experts have seen the impact that our own activities have had, and they're pretty settled on it. It's something that they're confident about. But outside of that, on the peripheries, those anxieties that underlie a lot of the denial, they exist in scientists as well, and some of them are willing to speak to that. But I think the bigger problem, and what you're talking about with these shock jocks, is there are a group of scientists who are almost specifically targeted over and over again to deny different types of science. It's just they've even become a career for some of them.
Wow, that's interesting. Now, I don't know what the situation here was in the United States last year. In November, there was a strike, a student strike, which undoubtedly you heard about. And I think it started in Sweden, if I'm correct, with a student there, or was it Norway or somewhere like that? Listeners will know. And it made its way to Australia. And one day in Australia, in late November, there was a big strike, and thousands of students didn't go to school. They all turned up in the centre of Sydney and held up protests about climate change and wanted the government to do something. And I couldn't help think that it was good of them to do that, because they're obviously passionate and concerned. But I couldn't help wondering if they were doing the right thing for the wrong reasons. In other words, do they actually have enough knowledge, or are they simply jumping on the bandwagon of this, even if it's the right conclusion? And I just wondered what you'd think about the younger generation taking such action.
Well, I think that it's a part of how we are approaching. We certainly support students in expressing themselves in that way, and here in the U.S., I think it's been more of a court case. Students have actually brought against different states about their being denied a quality education by not having climate change, and those haven't gone very far yet, but they're still working their way through the court system to some level. And there are a lot of programs that are meant to empower youth in terms of climate action and things like that, and doing something. A lot of the groups are looking for making their communities more resilient by getting students involved in not only understanding climate change, but then translating that into things they can do locally to make a difference in terms of drought or water issues or agricultural issues and so on. And I mentioned earlier that we sort of take our own niche in this bigger piece, and that is to get to those misconceptions and inoculate students against them in a way that they can really understand the issues. Obviously, most of these students haven't studied climate change to a level where they understand the issues so thoroughly that they can speak to it a way that an expert would, but that's not necessary. So long as they're focusing on action that is built around finding solutions to real problems, I think that's very productive.
Well, it is a huge problem, of course, and we don't know what the next 5 or 10 years will bring, because, and again, I haven't seen the latest research, but I don't think it's slowing down any. No. And I don't know what the next decade will bring us in terms of direct impact on our climate, our society, etc. But I think the kids are doing a good thing. But you're right. I don't think they have the knowledge to really speak to what they're doing. Right. But they're passionate enough. And I guess it's a generational thing too, isn't it?
It's certainly a generation. I think this generation that's coming up, my daughter's part of it. They do have a sense of activism. They want to make change part of their lives. And so I definitely think that there's an energy in this generation that is very positive. I think, speaking to your earlier question too, as long as this one, is that there is kind of maybe a razor's edge in terms of doing good and doing damage, and conceptually with climate change. And a lot of the people that fight climate change and deny it will take advantage of some of that naivete at times and sort of try to undo some of those efforts. And the impact on extreme weather, for instance, is one of those areas where climate change is not causing a specific hurricane or a specific drought or a specific wildfire, but it's contributing because it's increasing the odds of those things happening. That's a very tricky thing to really communicate effectively, and the science behind it is really still evolving in terms of getting the data. There is clear data now that's clear enough to make that connection, that we can connect climate change to these events, but it's not a direct causal relationship, and that is easily turned into a misconception by somebody who wants to deny it, that wants to say, oh, this is just something that's happened all the time. We've always had extreme weather. There's no connection. And so unless you can really talk about what the connection is, and that there's more heat in the oceans, or there's perhaps more drier air in the jet stream, or the jet stream's weaker, and various things that are contributing to those extreme events, but it's not directly causing them, and that's a difficult thing to do.
Now let's before we wrap up, let's go on another little tangent here, and I don't know if this is something that the Centre will have to address one day or not, but I've been absolutely dumbfounded by the rise of the flat earth movement.
Yeah.
Is this impacting on anything you do here, or is it just so bizarre and crazy?
It's always been part of kind of what we do when we approach evolution and misconceptions about evolution, because it's in the nature of science. We've just added it. Actually, we're going to recruit teachers in addition to our climate change teacher ambassadors and our evolution teacher ambassadors. We're going to have a nature of science group specifically focused on the nature of science, because anytime we're with our evolution teachers or our climate change teachers, it inevitably comes around to a discussion about, well, how does, it's the nature of science that the students need to learn here, because that's what a lot of the misconceptions are tied into misconceptions about science itself. And the flat earth, it's kind of become just a fad, I think, or a meme of sorts.
I hope so.
It's always been there. Those groups have always been around. It's become
the last 2 years.
Though, the last few years, a few celebrities and athletes or whatever have kind of made it. I think sort of a new fad. I don't know that it'll have any more traction now than it has in the past. So we're not focused, at least at this point, on that as our front.
I hope you don't have to be.
No, and I don't think we will. But we certainly monitor all of that, because it is worth being able to tell a teacher, this is all part of the nature of why we need people to be literate, scientifically literate, and why they need to understand how science is done and how it provides explanation and for phenomena. And it's not just a matter of opinion. It's not just, well, you think this and I think that, so we can have this debate. Science doesn't operate that way. I like to say, science doesn't proceed by debate. You don't have two sides that say, I believe one thing and the other side believes the other, and they come to some consensus in the middle. And that's not what we mean by consensus. When we talk about a consensus of experts in science, it's the data that tells them what is right, what the evidence is. And so it's not a compromise. It's an agreement due to their finding the same conclusions over and over again through different lines of evidence. But the evidence, it's the data that drives that consensus, not compromise.
And finally, Brad, what can people do, teachers here in the United States and teachers around the world? I guess visiting the website here is a good start.
Yeah, we're redesigning our website right now. Right now, we do have our lessons available, and the webinars that we did with ACE are available. But in the next few months, we're going to be unveiling a lot more resources for teachers that'll be a lot easier to navigate and so forth. So that's probably going to be 2 or 3 months before it's completed, but I would certainly invite anybody to visit the website or to contact me directly about any of the resources I'm talking about, or any of the issues that they might have, questions they may have.
So there you are, folks, especially teachers out there, no matter where in the world you are. If you visit www.ncse.com, you'll find all the resources and information there. And, of course, you can contact the good people here directly for any help. Well, Brad Hoge, thank you very much for your time today, and I look forward to maybe interviewing you again in a year or two to see how we're progressing.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. It's an ever-changing thing. The interesting thing about climate change is that it is a new part of education. I mean, it's just now getting into the standards. It's just now being a need for teachers to teach this, and so the resources are being developed as we speak. And so a year from now, there's going to be a lot more to talk about.
Sziasztok!
Всем привет!
Hejsan allihop! Guys, I just had the most amazing experience.
What experience, Andras?
Andras, have you been to the pub? I told you not to hang out with Marsh. You know he was blessed by Peter Popov.
No, Yelena, I'm not talking about psychics. It was a real ESP experience.
You have been to the pub. Either that or you've been smoking something.
No, Pontus. The ESP is the European Skeptics podcast. It's the most amazing thing. You get to know so much about skeptics and their activities across Europe. You know, events, hot topics, and interviews with lots of interesting people.
Oh wow, cool. By the way, Pontus, you just committed the false dichotomy fallacy.
I guess that means I'm really wrong.
Yep. And you can even learn about those fallacies on the show and hear about people spreading silly ideas. You should really check it out. It's the ESP, the European Skeptics Podcast. It's on every week.
Alright, so where can I get this ESP experience? It sounds good.
You can go online at theesp.eu, follow it on Twitter at espodcast_EU, or like the podcast on Facebook. Oh, and you can also contact the show by sending them an email to info@theesp.eu. And if you want to subscribe, do a quick search for the European Skeptic Podcast on SoundCloud, iTunes, or Stitcher.
I don't know how you can believe.
Brian Dunning, hello.
Hello, sir. How are you? Good to see you as always.
Thank you. We're sitting here in the downstairs section of Skeptoid Media's palatial headquarters, Thunderwood Ranch, and we're delighted because a couple of minutes ago we looked out the window and the snow is snowing. Does snow? Does snow fall? What's happening?
Exactly. Well, right now you would say it's really dumping because it really is. Look out the front. That's crazy.
Oh yeah.
A lot of snow.
We went out before to make a quick video for the folks back home, and we came back inside and it's really coming down. Brian, wonderful to see you. I love coming to Bend, the first time here in winter. And what I want to do is get a direct update from you about science friction and a quick overview for those people out there who are maybe new to the Skeptic Zone or Skeptoid. What's it all about?
So Science Friction is a feature documentary that we're executive producing. Emery is the director. And it's about scientists who get misquoted or edited out of context on these, air quotes, science networks on television, which happens more often than anyone would fear to think. So, the average case is you're a scientist and you go on to give your expert opinion on whatever this show is about, ancient aliens or something, and they often will edit the words in a sentence even, or they'll have you start to say one thing, they'll cut away to something else, they'll cut back to you finishing a different thought. They're trying to make it sound like these legitimate scientists are supporting the idea that aliens built the pyramids or what have you. So we're going around, we're interviewing as many of these scientists as we can to whom this has happened. We're interviewing some industry people who engage in this practice to explain how and why they do it. So it's going to be quite the interesting expose. The production update is, we've just finished having the holidays right now, and so we're just kind of picking up after that. Before the holidays, we sent a film crew out to Washington, D.C. to the American Geophysical Union conference where they had 32,000 Earth scientists attend this conference. It's out of this world.
32,000.
32,000. I wasn't there personally, so I don't know what it looked like, but oh my God. So we had arranged in advance with quite a few of them to sit down with an interview about their experiences. And many of these being earth scientists, it'll be two basic cases. They edit them to make it sound like the giant earthquake is coming any second now to kill us all and slide California into the ocean.
Or the, what is it, the mega volcano?
The Yellowstone super volcano, yes. That it's going to explode any day now and wipe out civilization. And both of these are old jokes in the geophysical community. And it happens. They have to be so careful when they go on TV, but no matter how careful you are, this happens. So we collected some great interviews there, and we've got at least 3 more little shooting tours planned. One is going to go through the East Coast, one is going to go through the Southwest, and one is just going to be right there in Los Angeles, where the film crew's based. That's the update.
Wow, that's fantastic. And for those people who don't know, it's being driven by the kind generosity, if you can say that, kind generosity, the generosity of fans and listeners to Skeptoid particularly.
Which is, it's being crowdfunded, which is unusual for a feature film, because you say, oh, it's going to be in theaters, so it makes lots of money, so what do you need crowdfunding for? So since we're executive producing at Skeptoid Media, and we're an educational nonprofit, we're not just making a movie and giving it out there to some studio. Here, take this, put it in theaters, make money on it. We're going to retain the educational rights. And so when you're retaining a certain amount of the rights, you're not going to get the same kind of a deal as you would when you normally sell a film to a distributor. So we're crowdfunding basically the whole production phase of it. And then we're going to be able to include it in the Teacher's Toolkit, which is one of our growing and upcoming products here at Skeptoid Media. And it's going to be it's going to have educational curricula that we go along with it, and it's something that we're just going to be able to give out to schools for free. That's going to really help students understand what they're seeing in the media and learn to recognize that the media is not giving them the full story when it comes to true science and true history, because those are the things that are really abused the most in the pop media of television.
The entertainment industry. Where can people go to find out more?
Yeah, so sciencefriction.tv is the website. That's not only the crowdfunding website, but it's also where we've got a little trailer, and we've got some of the stories that we're featuring from some of the scientists are up there. And what you should at least do is put your name on the mailing list, because every couple of weeks I'm sending out a new update for who we've shot lately. Here's some new stories. Here's some exciting things happening with the film. And, of course, donors, if you want to donate to the film, then you can get your name in the credits. We're doing that whole thing. You'll be able to get a digital download of the film. And there's other perks for people who may want to donate at higher levels. And you can see all of that on the website, sciencefriction.tv.
That's the clue, folks. That's where you should head to find out more. Now, last time I was here, we had a lot of fun. We went out to a lava cave and we did a report. And also we had a gag where I was hiding from you because you were Bigfoot. But, all joking aside, well, sort of, recently you were telling me this just yesterday, that you attended a Bigfoot meetup or a Bigfoot meeting or something like this?
Yeah, this is a total change of gears here, obviously. Yeah. So this is Central Oregon, which is, we're right near all of the major Bigfoot stories from history. The Patterson-Gimlin film was shot, just a few hours south of here. And to this day, there's Bigfoot reports coming out of right here where I live all the time, the Cascade Range. So here in Bend, Oregon, I found on the meetup group that they have a Bigfoot club of people who believe that Bigfoot is real. They're absolutely persuaded. And they go out and they have regular camping trips, which are fun, whether you believe in Bigfoot or not. And it's nice to have some sort of organization to the camping trip, I guess. Very nice group of folks. So my wife and I, we went, they held their meeting at a little pizza place here. We went, they were all super, super nice. There was not a single person there that you'd say is a raving, crazy Bigfoot lunatic. There were even a couple of working scientists in semi-related sciences there. And we had great conversation. The main thrust of the evening was everyone went around and told what their Bigfoot experience was. And there wasn't a single person there who claimed to have seen a Bigfoot. And by far the most common story that many of them had was that they had heard branches being struck together, like you pick up a fallen limb and you beat it against a tree. They say they had heard that, and they all believe that that's evidence that Bigfoot is out there. For some reason, it's not clear to me why. They all think that that's an activity that Bigfoot would be likely to engage in.
And that's why I had you do it in our joke podcast about 6 months ago.
Yeah, that's right. It's really popular.
And you did. You stood about 20 meters from me, got a big log, and going whack, whack, whack,
whack, whack. I've since learned from other people that there are birds that make these exact same sound incredibly loud. I don't know what kind of bird it is. I was told, but I didn't recognize the species. It wasn't a woodpecker, so I shouldn't say more because I really don't know what's going on. In fact, if someone does,
you
please
did an
email
episode
me.
of Bigfoot sounds, didn't you?
Yes, on the Skeptoid podcast. Just recently, I did an episode, but it was on vocalizations.
Right.
So, a Bigfoot goes rah rah. These beliefs are that Bigfoot will kind of scream like we hear at the zoo, like chimpanzees do at the zoo or whatever, or will make some other sounds. And Bigfoot enthusiasts have collected quite a few recordings, and they've got them on, you can buy them on albums, or they're just all over the internet as little sound clips you can listen to. And the funny thing is that virtually every one of these, you can find an analog from the known animal kingdom. A lot of them are owls, a lot of them are foxes. One of the most popular ones is a bird called a common loon. So there's very little mystery, but there's also a lot of really cool new stuff to learn. I was amazed at some of the animal sounds when I was collecting them. Very unexpected. And if I heard these sounds out in the woods in the middle of the night, I would go, "Oh my God, what the heck is that?" Yeah. It never would occur to me that it's a bird or an owl or a lynx. That lynx sound is crazy.
Just looking out the window again, on the other side over there, and we were out in this snow, as I said a little while ago, to make a little video, and then we thought, it's getting too cold. I would not like to go out hunting for Bigfoot in the middle of winter in Oregon, to be honest.
Well, if you're properly equipped, yes.
You have to be, yeah.
If you, we've taken the Jeep up in the snow a few times, so that's a lot of fun. I had to learn a whole new type of Jeeping. How do you Jeep in the snow? Which is very different than how you do it out in the desert or in the sand or on rocks, which is, most of my experiences. And I've had to buy all new clothes, of course, and everything, and everyone in my family have all got snowshoes now, so do the whole thing.
No, it's great. I love this part of the world. I'm having a wonderful time sitting back on this comfortable couch at Skeptoid headquarters looking at the snow falling. But for now, Brian Dunning, thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone, and a big hi to everybody in Australia. I hope I'll be back soon. I'm really just having a few days break here in Oregon. I've got another dog. I've got important things to do in California, but a few days break for me, then back to California, and sometime or other I'll be heading back to Sydney. And again, to all those people who are waiting on packages from the Skeptic Zone, new Patreon people, I hope you understand that I will get those to you as soon as I can, and I hope it'll be worth the wait. And thank you to those people who contribute to the Skeptic Zone via Patreon, PayPal, at skepticzone.tv. It means a lot to the show. It means there is a show, and it means that everybody else listening for free, which is fine, are benefiting from your generosity. And I hope you get a lot out of the show every week. A big shout out to Maynard, and I look forward to catching up to Maynard as soon as I get home. Don't forget his podcasts over at maynard.com.au, and he, like me, depends on the generosity of listeners to help keep his podcasts going, like Bunga Bunga. So if you're missing hearing Maynard at the moment on the Skeptic Zone, head over to maynard.com.au for his podcasts. I think I'm lost. Where am I? I've been wandering around for some time now, just on these back roads on the outskirts of Bend. It's just, it's beautiful. Central Oregon is just beautiful. And I'm not getting any kickback from the Oregon Tourist Board or anything like that. But for this week, as I crunch along some more snow, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Oregon. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation.